Podcast 411, item 232. Today's guest is Jennifer Briney, host of the Congressional Dish Podcast.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 Podcast. In this episode, we have an interview with Jennifer Briney. After the interview, I will get you some additional podcasting news and where I'll be going and go over the setup I used to record this interview, which was done face-to-face at Podcast Movement 2016. You may be surprised by the setup. So please stick around after the interview to find out the details. As always, your feedback is greatly appreciated. Give us a call, 206-666-4357. That's 206-MOM-HELP. Or send an email to podcast411@gmail.com. And now, on to the interview with Jennifer. Here we go. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
First question I always ask is, what was your first computer?
Oh, it's definitely something bought by my dad. So, I don't know. He was always an early adopter of computers. So, the first memory I have was just the AOL and what the actual computer was, I have no idea. We'll have to ask my dad.
A gray beige box.
Yeah, it was this magic box that let me talk to my friends without using the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first podcast you listened to?
I do. It was Randy Rhoads' podcast. Do you remember her? She was on Air America when that was a thing for that hot minute, and she was super liberal, and it was during the Bush administration. So she was just a different take on what was going on. And when Air America fizzled, she started doing podcasts. And she actually charged right from the very beginning. So I was paying for her podcast until I realized that there were,
Well, that's where Mark Maron came out of there, too.
He did. But he does a different monetization. She's actually coming back, and she's still trying to get people to pay for all of her content. So I don't know. I'm happy she's getting back in the game. But yeah, she was my first. And then I bought the whole package for Air America, and then it died.
It died a slow, withering death. Well, it really wasn't that slow, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite shows was Mark Maron and Sam Cedar in the break room.
And they both have podcasts?
They do. Very successful ones.
See, it didn't go away. It just, all the talent went to podcasting.
Yeah, it's true. And it gave me hope. Because I wanted to work for Air America. That was the dream. And then it didn't exist anymore. So I moved to Hawaii and waited tables.
I don't know which one would be better.
Yeah.
Hawaii sounds pretty good.
It was for a while.
Okay.
It was.
Tell our listeners about your show.
So Congressional Dish is my attempt to get Americans to pay attention to the Congress. And I'm basically reading bills and watching hearings and finding the things that I find the most fascinating and sharing them with my listeners. And it's really important for me to be able to share what's actually going on. So as much as I possibly can, I bring in actual audio from usually the House of Representatives, but sometimes the Senate too, and just try and expose people more to what their government is actually doing as opposed to campaigns.
So these are those bills you see in the movies when they come in, they look like they're about 12 inches thick, and they drop these big things. How long does it take you to get through a bill typically?
Well, see, that's a funny question because some bills are less than 1 page. And a congressional bill, like if I'm reading a 2,000-page bill, it's more like a 500-page book because the margins are huge and a lot of the words are completely unnecessary. So it sounds a lot harder than it actually is. But
Sounds
some
like
bills,
a lot of 5-hour energy drinks.
I don't drink caffeine.
Oh.
Ever. I don't know. I find it all fascinating. So yeah, sometimes it'll take me under a minute. And then Obamacare took me about 60 hours of nonstop reading, ended with a mental breakdown because it was such a poorly constructed law that you can actually hear it in the episode when you hear my brain break. But yeah, it just depends on the bill, depends on how many scandals are stuck in them. There's really no average.
Have you read one and said, wow, this is actually pretty good?
Yeah.
What would
it
you
happens.
Say? Okay. Do you remember? Yeah, I mean, are you more surprised when that happens? You're like going back and going, okay, what did I miss?
I mean, you can kind of tell based on what my topic is, what I'm looking for. Like with the last few Congresses, they've been very fossil fuel favoring. So it's like, I kind of know what I'm getting into. Some have been pleasantly surprising, but it's most of the time lately it's bad, unfortunately. I mean, I am surprised when I see nothing there to talk about. And that's the thing. If I see something that's pretty mundane, it's not going to make it into the show because it's not that interesting. So most of the anger-inducing bills are making it in right now. There's a lot more of those than good ones.
I heard you mention on one of the episodes, one of the, as you call them, dingleberries, one of the worst dingleberries was from my congressman. I should say the congressman that covers my district would probably be a better way to phrase that, Kevin Yoder.
Yeah.
I want you to explain that one, because that one I thought was, when you explain it, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, that one's quite the scandal. So one of the things that caused the 2008 downturn is that you had banks. So it's like, let's say Bank of America, because they were one of the banks that did this. We put our money into the bank, and there used to be a law saying that if you were taking deposits from regular people like you and me, you can't be an investment bank. You can't go and then gamble on Wall Street with those deposits. And that in the late 1990s became fair game, and that's what they were doing with our deposits. So in 2008, when the stock market and like all of the credit default swaps, when all that house of cards came crashing down, our deposits were at risk with it. So in the Dodd-Frank financial reform bill, they did this thing called the push-out rule, which basically said that if you want to take customer deposits, that's fine, but you can't gamble with it. And Kevin Yoder took a provision which was literally written by Citigroup lobbyists and attached it to a government funding law, which if that hadn't become law, then the government would have shut down. So it's one of these things, this is a very popular way of getting unpopular things into law, where you attach it to something that must be signed, that wouldn't be signed on its own. They tried to do that on its own, but that's how that became law. And because it was a 2,000-page government funding law right before Christmas, very few people even know that that part of the law was gutted.
Well, you can thank Johnson County for that one.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, guys. Vote better, please.
There are, I would call them politician podcasts, and there's politics podcasts. How would you define where yours falls in this? Because I don't know if either one really covers what you do.
Yeah, it's tough to define it. Like this year, my audience decided to nominate me for the government and organizations category. And the year before, they had nominated it for news and politics. But when I think of politics, I think of what we're seeing on the TV all the time, which is horse race style campaign coverage. I don't touch the campaigns. I mean, I did one episode this year about who I'm voting for in the primary, but most of the time I'm not talking about elections. I'm not talking about campaigns. I am talking about government. And I think that's one of the things that makes Congressional Dish so unique, is that it doesn't really fit in any category. It's not something that I think is being done by too many people, unfortunately.
Why did you want to do this?
I was just really horrified, to be honest, by the Bush administration. I wasn't political as a kid. I was living in Germany when we started the war. I saw it from a completely different perspective. And then I came back and no one was talking about this stuff. And so I started independently researching, trying to understand how the government worked. And the more I learned, the more I realized that nothing can be done without Congress. I didn't realize that it's Congress that controls all the money. I didn't realize that it was Congress that was supposed to declare the war, and that never happened. Congress has all the power, and that was designed that way because Congress is our branch. And so one of the things that gives me hope when people are like, what can we do to fix this? One of the things that gives me hope is that the House of Representatives, we can hire or fire them every 2 years. The entire House can be replaced every 2 years. And so if we could actually spread the idea of just voting differently even once, especially in like a midterm election where a lot of people don't bother to vote, if we went to the polls in massive numbers, that's a non-violent way of creating massive change that could change everything overnight. And once I realized that, it was like, okay, now I'm going to make it my job to drag as much attention over here as I possibly can. And podcasting just seemed like it's a good place for me to start. I do think that down the road, I do think that having an image aspect to it would help, but podcasting is what I can handle at the moment.
And there's more time in the day for people to listen to it. More time in the day to consume when you listen. And this is the type of thing where someone can listen to your show to and from work, because your episodes tend to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah, they're getting longer.
Now, other than just covering what's going on in Congress, you will also talk a little bit more about your feel. So I notice your show's kind of like segmented in two segments. First part is whatever the topic is, and the second part is a little bit more freeform.
Yeah, the second part is my, so the way that I'm funding this podcast is not through advertisements, it's through my listeners. And so at this point, anyone who contributes and writes in a letter, I'm reading what they're writing to me and I'm responding. And so the second part is, it's really just for my community. And I don't know how long it's going to be like this because it is getting very long. But yeah, the second part is, it's really fun for me because people ask me questions and they'll challenge me on my knowledge, but it's also how they get to know me better as a person, because I do feel like where I'm not a lawyer, like I'm trying to find interesting stuff and doing the best I can. But I do think that it's important for people to know where the information's coming from. Like, what are my biases? Like if it comes to fossil fuels, I don't like them. And I've been very upfront about that. So it's like, that is the type of stuff I'm looking for. So I want people to get to know me so that they can judge where they're getting their information from. And then if they want to challenge me on something, I give them everything they need in the show notes so that they can do their own research. But I think it's important to know who's filtering your information.
Now, one of the things you said in your episode, and this will be a little off politics here, is you have a new dog.
I do.
Abby. What kind of dog?
Abby is a Maltese mix. And we don't know what she's mixed with. I found her on a bike path.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she's not a purebred. She had escaped her foster home and found me, and so I took her home.
All right. Well, when this episode comes out, it'll be right. We will just have gotten a new dog. So.
What kind of dog are you getting?
We're getting a little Frenchie bulldog.
Oh, how fun! They snort.
Yes. It's pointy ears, and all my dogs are always named after Star Trek characters. So he will, of course, be called Spock.
I love that.
Yes.
Well, congratulations.
Yes. Well, you too.
Thank you. I'm obsessed with my pup. I miss her already.
You mentioned on a recent episode that you were talking about Reddit. So what are some of the things you do to help promote the show? Obviously, Reddit's one of them. And explain what you're doing there on the Reddit side.
Well, I'm doing nothing. There was one magical day on Reddit that changed everything for me. I was contacted by these two guys. They wrote the Marketer's Guide to Reddit, and they wanted to do a case study with someone like me. So they were like, we'll set you up with an Ask Me Anything. We'll do all the work. Just, are you willing to do this? I said, sure. And so I had never used Reddit before, and I sat down at around 10 a.m. and started the Ask Me Anything, and 12 hours later, I'm still doing it, thinking this is normal. And unbeknownst to me, it rose up to number one, not only on their AMA page, but the front page. When I checked my Libsyn stats, I had 30,000 downloads on my last episode, and I was getting emails and just tweets and just this barrage of people that were, looking to connect with me, and I was shocked. And so I'm still getting people from that Reddit AMA that are contacting me, and I just haven't capitalized on that yet. Like I have a subreddit, but I'm not using it, and the guys that wrote the book, we're gonna start working together, but marketing is something I need to start really focusing on, because to be completely honest with you, I've done no marketing, and it's a big mistake, but I'm so focused on, as you have taught me, making good content that there's only so many hours in the day, so.
If you can get your audience to do the marketing for you, that gives you time to do the content. And it's tough getting the audience to do the marketing for you sometimes. But
I mean, something I'm doing is working.
The Reddit, that is something I'm going to have to look into.
Well, and I think that's where my people are, because they're very active political people. There's so many comments going on Reddit, so I should be more active there. It's just a matter of, I've been working on outsourcing the busy work. So I recently outsourced the audio editing, I've outsourced the administration stuff, and I want to outsource some of the marketing. I'm looking into hiring an agent to get me on other podcasts. And I feel like once that stuff is more automated and I have a little bit more of a rhythm with both of my coworkers now, I think then I'll be able to focus more on Reddit, because I need to be personally involved in that and creating a community and being active in it.
When you've gone to the shows, I've seen you at now 6 or 7 shows at least. So you've done LA Podfest, you've done this show. This is your third one.
Yeah, I was one of the Kickstarters at this one.
Yes. Why do you come to the shows?
I mean, this is where I learn. The tech of podcasting is incredibly intimidating to me. I don't enjoy technology. If I hear about something new and exciting, it gives me anxiety because now I have to learn something else. And here is where I've developed a group of friends that are in podcasting. Most of them are techie nerd guys that will sit me down and be like, no, this will work for you. This is why it's easy. Let me show you. You just did this for me with this app. So I learn just by being around these people, and I found it to be such a supportive community, and it's just good for me where most of my day is spent working by myself in my living room, that I'm not alone in this, and that this is my yearly reminder that there's a whole community of people here, and they're my friends, and I fit somewhere, because it's kind of weird going and hanging out with my friends that have jobs and coworkers, and it's like, oh, there's Jen, fresh from her living room, unshowered, and no one knows what I do all day. So it's nice to have my people.
I like these events because I tell my wife, this is when I get to talk to adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
Face to face.
Usually it's me talking to the dog or myself.
Or my kids. Yeah, it's getting out to events. If you work from home and a lot of times it's sanity time.
For sure.
So what is your recording setup? How do you normally record your show?
Well, I live in the Bay Area, so I cannot afford to have a separate room for my podcasting. So I have a desk in my living room, and I have my Zoom H4n, which is plugged into my microphone, which I do have an arm for because I have a bad habit of, I'm doing it right now, my arms are flailing, and so I used to hit the microphone, so I have an arm.
I heard a microphone hit once.
Yeah, it still happens.
I do it too. So.
Yeah, even with it flying in front of my face, I'll still hit it, but it's not nearly
I'm
as
Italian,
much.
so I talk with my hands all the time.
I have an Italian family. It's probably where I got it from.
That's how you make Italian shut up. You have him sit on his hands.
Yeah, you handcuff him. Yeah, so it's just in my living room. I usually break it down in between recording just because it looks ridiculous. Yeah, it's a very unprofessional setup.
How long ago did you start podcasting?
I started in September of 2012. And 6 months before that of listening to Daniel J. Lewis's podcast and taking notes on everything. So really I started in about summer of 2012.
And that's the Audacity to Podcast, folks.
Yes, the Audacity to Podcast. And that's really all I did is I found him. I liked the way he explained things. I downloaded about 30 episodes, took notes, did what he said, and he did not lead me astray. And now I'm actually friends with him, which is so exciting for me.
And we're just hanging out with Daniel.
Yeah.
So and I like Daniel's hairstyle.
I do too. He's a cue ball now.
Yes. Just like me and Gordon and Daniel. As someone took a picture of the three of us and put it up.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
So you mentioned an agent on a couple episodes. What are you looking for the agent to do? What were your thoughts there on getting an agent?
I just want to get onto other podcasts, and I don't know how to do it.
Have you just thought of just reaching out? I know you mentioned the Young Turks. Reach out to the guys.
That feels so awkward to me, to be like, hey guys, I have a podcast. Can I come on your show? Like, I don't know how to do that without being a total nerd. And when I did reach out to people, I felt like it blew up in my face a little bit. I went and met Joe Rogan, and he actually asked me to come and meet him in Boston and didn't remember who I was. So to go up there and be like, hi, I'm Jen. I host Congressional Dish. Do you remember me? And he gives me that look of like, no. Why are you plugging yourself to me? So that was just so scarring. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to do my thing, do good content, hopefully that people will invite me when my work, justifies itself. But I don't want to wait anymore. So I feel like if I had someone that was reaching out to other podcasts that I might not even know about, and saying this might be a good match for you, because I don't do the interview swap. That's another thing that's not in my toolbox. So where I can't do you come on my show, I'll come on yours, I just feel like having a representative that puts a professional face onto my thing would help me reach out to the Rogans and Adam Carollas and the people that might want to talk to me, Sam Cedar. But right now I'm just some girl who doesn't know anyone with a podcast, and so that's just a lot of it's me. A lot of it's my uncomfortableness with marketing myself, but that's the reason. Why do you have thoughts on that?
My thought is if you find a show that has guests, that does an interview show, and you think you're a good fit, say, hey, I'm the host of this show. I know you have guests. I love your show, and I would love just to be a guest on it sometime if you're ever looking for somebody else. Here's my show, and I'd love to come on. And really, I think a lot of podcasters you'll find will be like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, if they think it's a good fit, they'll bring you on.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think there's something tacky about that. It's like inviting yourself to a party.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit tougher when you get someone with a Joe Rogan with giving his numbers and that. But, you know, there's other people. There's a lot of politics podcasts. So, I mean, and on either side of the spectrum. So you might want to reach out to either side and say, hey, I know I tend to slant all the way to the left, but I know you're on the right. But, you know, you recently mentioned, you could look through the show notes and find something they mentioned and say, hey, I know you recently mentioned this, and we talked about this on my show. And anytime you want to have someone come on, I'd love to come on and talk with you about it.
Well, that's another challenge. Usually when I'm walking around with headphones in my ears, I'm listening to congressional hearings. So there's a lot of podcasts I'm not even aware of. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. And I wish I had more time for that. I wouldn't even know who to reach out to. There's the 10 that I have on my regular list, but that's about it.
Well, that would be okay. Well, I can see why you reach out to an agent. Hopefully they don't charge too much.
Well, and that's a concern too.
Yes. I found it interesting you mentioned you got a grant. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then the next episode you go, where'd my funding for new people go?
Dried up completely.
And do you think it was correlated between the fact that you got some money and people, oh, well, I don't need to give Jen anymore?
I do.
I hope it's not that, but that would be, I thought you had a really good, comeback on that next episode. Hey, this is just a little bit here and extra, and you're doing a lot of work.
Yeah. And actually the funding since that episode it's gone back to normal.
Okay.
So I'm not quite as panicked as I was, but I'm at this point now where I do have to consider how much do I want to share with people, and I like the idea of being completely open. I feel like one of the problems we have as a society is we don't talk about how much money we're making, so we can't compare to each other to see.
Well, another problem we have is some people who talk about how much money they're making exacerbate the numbers.
Yeah, that happens too. So I feel like being honest is a good thing. I am considering closing off that information to only the people that are contributing. I know that that's possible with Libsyn. So I am considering, because the second half of my episode is now getting so long that I can thank people, but then be like, for the extended version where you get the numbers, how much was brought in, how much went out. I feel like if you're a contributor, you get to get that information. But for the people that are just listening and freeloading, which is the vast majority of them, maybe they shouldn't have access to that information. So I am thinking about locking that up now. So it's kind of like both. I'm still being transparent, but at the same time not telling everyone about my personal income.
One thing you could do is have the episode where it's public but on your site only. And not in your feed, not out to the rest of the world, but just an episode that your regular listeners can come to or your funders can come to and get to.
Is that something I could isolate and put just in my Congressional Dish app through Libsyn? Because I have my own app.
Right, you could just publish that episode only to the app.
That might be what I do, because I do want to encourage people to use the app more too. I love that app, so that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll every now and then I'll release content just to the app.
Okay.
And that's my way of thanking the folks that use the app too.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
And you can even do categories. So you can set up a category and have your regular episodes be primary, and then the other ones can be funder category, and then main, whatever you want to call it, general or podcast category. And that way people can go through that just want to listen to the funding stuff or just want to listen to the other.
Yeah.
Have that option.
Well, and I think that would help the show too, because right now you look at an episode, it looks like it's 2 hours long, but the stuff that you want is an hour and 15. So I also think that would help the new people understand how long the show really is. I think there would be a lot of benefits to that. But yeah, the funding drying up, that freaked me out.
Next couple of bills you're going to be talking about?
Well, my episode I'm releasing here at the conference is about this fake scandal that's been going on for 6 years now about the IRS targeting. I don't know if you've heard about this, but they're the Republicans. I'm just going to put it out there. It's the Republican Party. They've been saying that the IRS has been targeting conservative groups, but this is all about hiding secret money. So that's going to be a really fascinating episode for people that have no idea what I'm talking about with that sentence. And the following episode will be on a conference that I'm going to. At this point, I feel like I've done 3.5 years of pointing out what's wrong with the system. I do feel like it's my responsibility now to start offering good solutions or ideas And so I'm going to a conference where I'm hoping to find some and just hopefully find some congressional staffers, maybe get an interview. So I don't know what's going to happen there.
It's in St. Louis, is it?
It is.
What's the name of the conference?
It's called Netroots Nation. Okay. So it's supposedly activists. I've also heard that it's just crawling with congressional staffers. And so I'd love to find someone, even if it's anonymous, I don't care, but sit them down and say, what goes on? You know, you're sitting there all day, you get to watch it, like tell me what it's like to actually be there. I would love to get that interview, and I have 4 days to find that person. So that's the next episode. And then after that, I really have to prioritize what I do from now until the election. I have to pick the most important ones. We're gonna have to do the Student Success Act because it was a big overhaul of our education policy. It's happened in December at the same time as some very large bills, so that'll be on the agenda. Yeah, and then I have like 7 more episodes until the election. It's coming up pretty quick.
Okay. You get, obviously, a bunch of feedback from listeners.
Yeah.
Any memorable feedback that stands out for you?
I just got a 1-star review on iTunes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've got a few of those.
Wait. If you don't get a 1-star review as a podcaster, you haven't done enough emotionally to drive someone to iTunes to do 1 star.
Yeah.
1-star reviews mean you've hit somebody's buttons and you've done it good.
Yeah. It's like the hate
Right.
blasting through their fingertips. And this last one, most of them hurt me. This one didn't hurt me because in the end of it, the guy said that Jason needs to have me in the back office for a sit down to get the show back on track. I don't know anyone named Jason. I can't even imagine who this person is. So that was my favorite piece of feedback lately, where it's just like, okay, I didn't know I was working for this mystery man this whole time. I thought it was just me in my living room. So that one was fun. But actually, the vast majority of the feedback has been positive in a beautiful way. I think it has to do with the fact that I'm not preaching for one party or the other. I don't label myself. I refuse to label myself because I'm allowed to have opinions that don't fit into a box. And because of that, I get very little of the hate that you would expect from someone who does a political podcast. And I'm getting a lot of feedback from people saying, I never used to pay attention. I'm voting for the first time. Those mean more to me than anything because that's the goal. I want to fix what's going on in this country, and I want to do it without anyone having to die. You know, like the whole revolution thing doesn't sound fun to me. I would rather us do it through voting. So when I get a new voter or someone who wrote to their congressman for the first time, I mean, those pieces of feedback just keep me going on the bad days. I love it.
Last question here. Any advice for someone starting out podcasting today?
I feel so weird giving advice. I still feel like I'm
You're
green.
here speaking.
I know.
You're speaking a podcast movement.
I know. And I think that's probably the thing, is that I still feel so green that just do it. Mm-hmm. You know, I wasn't ready when I started this, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I just did it. I had an idea and I started, and 3.5 years later it's working. It doesn't have to be that sophisticated. My first microphone was not good. I had a $30 podcasting kit. It was horrendous. Didn't even have a microphone stand so that you could actually hear it fall down a few times. It sounded terrible. The editing was me in GarageBand. I mean, it was bad. But it got better, you know, just start. And reach out to the people that are helping. There's a lot of free podcasts, and the people that are hosting shows, you know, like Daniel J. Lewis and Dave Jackson and Ray Ortega and yourself. I mean, I contacted you like 2 weeks ago with a question. There are people in this community willing to help with any questions that you have, so just do it.
Where can people go and find your show?
My show is called Congressional Dish. It's everywhere podcasts are found. I do have my own app, which I highly recommend downloading in both the iTunes Store and Google Play, I think is what they call it for Android. And the website's congressionaldish.com. That's where you can find the most valuable thing I do, which is all the sources for all the stuff I say. I don't want you trusting me because I'm just some person who's wrong quite a bit, but I give you the sources so you can, you know, fact check me, do your own research, whatever. And that's all available at congressionaldish.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thanks to Jennifer for coming on the show and talking about her podcast, Congressional Dish, which you can find at congressionaldish.com or searching in iTunes for Congressional Dish. Or you can search in the iOS and Android app stores for the Congressional Dish app. And I'll have links in the show notes for episode 232 over at podcast411.com with all that information and other links we mentioned in this episode. Speaking of podcast411.com, since the last episode, I put up a blog post titled thoughts on Podcast Movement 2016 and Podcast Hall of Fame. In that post, I have a category player, which is, it has all the past Podcast 411 interviews with all the other members of the Podcast Hall of Fame. Make sure to check out that blog post and the player to hear those interviews if you haven't listened to old episodes of Podcast 411. Many of them are timeless. Getting inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame was obviously a great honor. My wife was there to share the special night with me, and I was sporting my tux with the custom bow tie. And if you would like to hear my acceptance speech, I actually re-recorded a clean version of it, and it is available as the bonus content for episode 232 in the Podcast 411 app only. I mentioned earlier in the show I would go over the setup I used to record this interview. It was really complicated. Well, okay, maybe not. It was the iPhone with the Boss Jock app and the iRig Mic Lav 2-pack. And I plugged that into the headphone jack, and that was it. The iRig Mic Lav 2-pack, I believe it runs about $79 regular price, and you can get it cheaper every so often. Boss Jock costs you $10, and that is a really portable and easy to use setup and take anywhere. And I lav Jen up and I lav myself up, and that was it. And as you can tell from today's sound, it sounds pretty good, other than the very beginning where there was a little bit of warble. We were just getting settled in. But yeah, if you bump the mic, a lav mic, you're going to get that. I did do some cleanup in the post with Sound Soap to pull out some low frequency rumble from the environment and the heating and air conditioning system. But the cleanup was really minimal. So overall, I was very happy with the sound quality. And again, that's just the iRig mic dual pack or 2-pack. And that's the lav version, of course. And that was it. Plugged right into the headphone jack of the iPhone. Obviously, whenever you record something like that, make sure you put your iPhone into airplane mode so you don't get a call in the middle of the recording. And then today's intro and outro, I use the iRig Mic HD plugged into my laptop. I will have links in the show notes for episode 232 over at podcast411.com with links to the lav mics from iRig and then the iRig Mic HD and then, of course, Boss Jock. If you go to podcast411.com and click on the speaking link, you will see all future events plus links to many past events I've spoken at. On August 7th, I'll be speaking at the Elite Man Conference in Plymouth, Mass. My session is titled Standing Out from the Crowd with Podcasting, and it's a session that goes over the power of podcasting and how you can use it to really break away from those that are just blogging or with little to no online presence. Matter of fact, the episode that you're listening to now, the intro and the outro were recorded at the hotel room while I was at the Elite Man Conference on Friday night on August 5th. Per where else I will be, September 23rd to the 25th, I will be at the LA Podfest in Los Angeles, California. Then in mid-October, the 13th to 15th, I'll be speaking at the Society of Adventist Communicators Conference, and that's in Denver, Colorado. And I was just confirmed for 2 more shows. In November, I'll be speaking at the DC Podfest. Yes, going back to DC. And then on February 1st, I will be doing a 3-hour clinic covering Podcasting 101, 201, and 301 at the Training 2017 National Convention in San Diego. In 3 hours, I will take people from zero to podcasting with lots of great advice to get them going right away. Again, I have a link in the show notes for these speaking events, well, except for the last 2. I'll get those links up shortly. Of course, if you are going to any of these events, please stop by and say hi. And if you have an event that you need someone to talk about podcasting, please let me know. Would be happy to come out and talk for you. And folks, make sure you are also subscribed to the feed. Go to thefeed.libsyn.com to get that show, or just search for The Feed, Libsyn, 3 words, in iTunes or other podcast aggregator apps. Elsie and I cover all of the podcasting news, and we answer listener questions, and we go over stats and lots of, well, real stats. So again, thefeed.libsyn.com. As always, if you have any feedback, give us a call, 206-666-4357. That's 206-MOM-HELP. Or send an email to podcast411@gmail.com. Until the next time, I'm your host, Rob, from Podcast 411, reminding you to listen different. This podcast is proudly hosted on Libsyn.com, If you would like to learn more about podcast hosting, go to libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com, as in Liberated Syndication. Find out more about podcast hosting, podcast monetization, podcast promotion through smartphone apps, as in iOS, Android, Windows Phone, plus many other features, including on Publish to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, WordPress, Google Play, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio, and others. Plus our new destination stats. Again, go to libsyn.com. And if you use promo code podcast411, you will get the rest of this month free and all of next month free.